So I want to talk about this Madbox, this new console coming that's going to compete with Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo down the line. And it's not a scam, or it doesn't seem like a scam like the Atari box or Atari VCS, whatever you want to call it, or the recently infamous Soldier Game series of consoles. This seems like a legit console that's actually going to compete with the big boys, or at least try to compete with the big boys. But point is, it's not going to be a total scam. It seems like a legit thing from a legit company, because this is from the studio that has developed games like Project Cars, most notably or most recently, but they've also developed Need for Speed games, and pretty much a whole bunch of car games. They're pretty much a car game developer. So they just announced a couple of days back that they are working on a video game console, Slightly Mad Studios, called the Madbox. I don't know if that's going to be the finished name of the console, but that's currently the name that they're saying is the name of the console, the Madbox, named after their studio, Slightly Mad Studios, which is based off of the United Kingdom. So this would actually be the first console manufacturer in a while based off of Europe. I actually don't even remember a European console manufacturer. I mean, you had Atari, they're European now, but before they were an American company. Then a French company bought them, so now it's French. But Sega, Nintendo, Sony, all Japanese. Microsoft, American. I can't think of like a major. I mean, maybe you could think of some obscure console that wasn't even like a real competitor. Maybe like a toy console or plug and play or something like that. But I can't think of a real console that was manufactured by a company based out of Europe. I really can't think of one. So this would be some cool, if you're European. I know some British folk don't like to be labeled European. They're British first, and they're European second, or they don't even think that a European label should even be put on them. You have a lot of Brexiteers that would definitely disagree with that notion. Oh, we're the first European company. No, we're British. So, sorry to anyone who may not like that, but still pretty interesting, I'd say, that a company based out of the United Kingdom is trying to get in on the console industry, because usually it's either American or mostly it's Japanese. The Japanese are really the ones that are making consoles. So, yeah, it's pretty cool that a company based out of the continent of Europe is getting involved now. So, I don't know what to make of this, really. I mean, let's go over a few details, and maybe I'll just try to make an overall analysis on, what this means for the industry. So, let's see. I'm just going to read through these tweets because they just randomly announced this in Twitter. It's going to go beyond next gen, and it's going to be out 3 years from now. So I don't know if that means like 2020, 2021. I guess 2021. Oh, no. 2022. My math is terrible. That would be 2022. That would be like a couple years after the 9th generation of consoles, the new Xbox and the PlayStation 5 come out. So it won't be too late to the party, and it will actually be more powerful than even the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox, which is a pretty bold statement because those consoles aren't even out yet. But this company is going all out. This is from Ian Bell, who works at Slightly Mad Studios, apparently. What is the Madbox? It's the most powerful console ever built. It's literally mad. You want 4K? You want VR at 60 frames per second? You want a full engine for free to develop your games on it? You have it. Interesting. So from what I can gather from that tweet, it's supposed to be it's going to bill itself as the most powerful console ever built. So it's going to be more powerful than the PlayStation 5 and Xbox. Like, are they saying that it's the most powerful console ever built right now? Like, as it currently stands? Or it's going to be more powerful than the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox? I think they're trying to hint that it's going to be more powerful than the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox. But based off of that tweet, it's kind of hard to tell, because you look at the leak specs of the new consoles, and it seems like you are going to get 4K. It would be crazy if you didn't get VR at 60 frames per second, because they're really trying to push the PlayStation VR, Sony, and for it to stay at 30 frames per second. I remember Bullet Barry telling me he played VR at 30 frames and he vomited it all over the place. So, VR games honestly, VR is the one thing I don't have too much experience with. But from what people have said, VR is much more enjoyable at 60 frames per second than 30 frames per second. More so than regular games, because the PC people always talk about how 60 frames is much better than 30 frames, but really that's emphasized with VR. So I think it would be a bad idea if the new consoles wasn't able to run games at 4K when the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X can run games at 4K, even though it's checkerboard. But still, if the game is only like if the console's only 1440p, and it can't run at 60 frames, that would seem like a step down, honestly, because these mid-range consoles, or these mid-generation console releases, are pretty much able to run games at 4K 30, and if these new consoles don't seem very much improved from that wouldn't look good. But I don't think we have to worry about that. It looks like the specs for the Xbox and PlayStation 5 seem in line with the what I already predicted, that I couldn't see ever being wrong, is that the game consoles will be capable of running games at 4K 60. Now, will VR games be able to run at 60 frames? I sure as hell hope so. But it seems like the VR games should be able to run at 60 frames on the PlayStation 5 at least. But I guess the more interesting part, kind of distinguishes it from the competition, is a full engine for free to develop your games on it. So they're gonna the engine that they use on their car games, they're gonna make it open source and allow any developers to develop games on it. I remember they also said that they are not going to force the developers of games on this open source engine to make games exclusively for the Madbox. So if they decide, this is an open source engine, we want to develop games for the PlayStation, as well as the Madbox. They're not going to say, no, you can't go on the PlayStation. They'll be like, you can go on the, I believe that you have to release games on the Madbox if you're going to use their engine, but you don't have to exclusively release it on the Madbox. That's what my understanding is. So, someone wrote on Twitter, sorry, that didn't come out right. So, you mean 45 frames per second, asynchronous time-space warp for other headsets? Would that mean 60 frames per second plus 60 frames per second plus an equivalent tech for a fake 120 FPS? So, this is in response to Ian Bell saying that your console can run at 120 frames per second, which even the next Xbox and PlayStation 5 will not be able to do. I'm pretty sure that their games are not going to run at 120 FPS. That might be a little bit of a stretch. But no, he says it's not going to be faked 120. It's going to be a solid 120 FPS with 60 frames per eye. So he said he's signed up to a lot of non-disclosure agreements, but some of the hardware incoming will cope. So he's not going to go into specifics because apparently he's with an NDA. I don't know. Does he work? Does this guy Ian Bell work with Madbox? Work with Mad Studios? I'm kind of confused about what his position is in the company. But it says, according to the CEO, the console will be a worldwide console, and it will be very competitive with upcoming console prices. So he's trying to be competitive with the PlayStation 5 and next Xbox, which I predict the PlayStation 5, if it's included with the PlayStation VR, will run you at least $500 or $499. But if they have a non-VR option, which I think they should have they should have one that's bundled with the VR. They should also have one that's without it, so that it's more accessible to more people. that runs at $399, similar to the PS4. And I think the next generation Xbox will be similar price to the PlayStation 5. Like, there won't be much of a price gap. I think they pretty much gave up with the Kinect, but I could be wrong. But this console is probably going to be competitive. I mean, they say it's going to be competitive, but it seems like, what they're saying, it's going to be more powerful than even the next Xbox and PlayStation 5, which begs the question, how is this company going to make money? It says prices will drop with ship quantity, but we're not planning on taking as large a cut as other console owners to enable us to cut prices massively. So, I'm kind of confused about this. So, prices will be lower because they're not going to be taking as large a cut as other console owners. So, what does he mean by cut? Does he mean a cut of the hardware money or the software? I mean, he's talking specifically about the console, the price of the console. But when he says he's not going to be taking as large a cut as other console owners, what is that supposed to mean? Like, I think that has to do with the actual hardware aspect of it. But again, they're being very vague. There's not too many details, so we'll look more into that in the future, I guess. We fully expect to be matching the best of the rest early in the life cycle, though. So, I mean, I don't know. It's pretty interesting. It says the very first images of the console will be released in the next month or two. So, that's something to look forward to, I guess. So you could see, it's probably going to be concept art. I don't think they have this thing actually finished if it's going to take them 3 years to release it. But I also remember hearing that this console wasn't going to pay AAA studios to release games exclusively on their platform, or they weren't really going to be pushing for exclusive games. They were just going to focus on the hardware aspect of it, which makes me kind of skeptical because most hardware manufacturers that have dipped their toes into the console industry, into manufacturing consoles that have focused more on the hardware than the software, have all crashed and burned. Every single one of them. The 3DO was probably the best example of this, but I don't think this company, they said they're going to be competitive with the PlayStation 5 and next Xbox, and I hope that's true, because I remember the 3DO ran people $600, $599 US in 1995. So, based on today's dollars, that would be close to $1,000 for a console. If they charge anything close to $1,000, anything above $500, this console is not going to take off. I guarantee you, because at that point, if you want a 4K console 3 years from now that can run VR games at 60 frames per second, you're better off just shelling out maybe a few $100 more and just get yourself a new computer. Why would you need to get this console? So while part of me is very intrigued about what they're going to do, I'm not going to count them out just because they're a new player in the game, because Sony's first dip into the console industry, when Sony was, granted Sony's a much bigger company than this company is, but they had no experience when it came to console gaming. I mean, they were working with Nintendo on a little something, but they really had no experience with manufacturing console hardware, doing all that. But they nailed it out of the park the first time around. Microsoft is another decent example, although the original Xbox didn't take off too much. But it's still, they didn't crash and burn, and Microsoft had no experience with hardware at that point. They were all about software and Windows. So, I think definitely has potential, but I fail to see what this is going to contribute to the industry that is going to set it apart, that's going to fill a void in the console market that needs to be filled, or there's a huge demand for, because at least with a Switch, what they compensated for their weak hardware was first of all it being Nintendo having their exclusive games and everything, and the Switch gimmick, and of course PlayStation, Sony, Microsoft, they have their exclusive games. This company is not going to have, it seems, too many exclusive games. Even if they say, next generation, we're not going to be developing games on our competitors. We're not going to be releasing Project Cars or whatever other games they make. We're not going to release Project Cars 3 or Project Cars 4 at that point. We're not gonna release it on the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox. That's not going to be like a game changer. I mean, it would make more of a dent if Sega went ahead and said, yeah, all our games we're gonna make a new console. It's gonna be exclusively on this console, like Sonic games and whatever other games, Japanese games, Yakuza, whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? Like, that would be more of a dent than Slightly Mad Studios publishing their games exclusively for their console. Again, if you're going to get into the console market, you need exclusives. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Because like I said, you focus too much on the hardware and too little on the software, you're going to crash and burn. The 3DO company learned that pretty quickly. 3DO focused so much on hardware, they had to charge a lot for the hardware, because when you focus too much on the hardware, that means you have to profit off of the hardware. And, you know, that's not really the console business model. It's more about subsidizing the cost of consoles and into software, basically. So what that means is that Sony sells the PlayStation at a loss, but they make all that money back, or they at least expect to make that money back with software sales. That's why these companies are pushing so heavily for digital distribution, because it makes them a lot of money. They have their own store. They don't have to go through GameStop or Best Buy or whoever else. It makes them a lot of money. And that's really where their money comes from. That's always been the case. That's why do you think, I mean, another good example, why do you think printer manufacturers, you know, the printers are, you know, decently priced, but then you have ink cartridges that cost like $80, $90. That's because they want, that's how they make their money. Ink. That's the big money maker, not the printer itself, but the ink. So that's probably the best example that I could think of why, you know, how consoles work. I don't know if these guys really know what they're doing. I really can't say yes or no at this point, because this is the only information we have. But it seems like they're emphasizing too much on the hardware aspect. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against releasing a powerful console. It's going to be more powerful than the next Xbox or the PlayStation 5, but they need to truly make it competitive. They say it's going to be competitive, but Atari said that the Jaguar was competitive. 3DO said that their consoles were affordable. So what does affordable actually mean to these people? I don't know. And if it's such a high price point, to the point where it would just make more sense to just get into PC gaming than buy a very expensive high-end console that would have fewer games than its competition, because that's really what console's all about. It's less than the hardware, it's more about the games. Nintendo is probably the best example of this. Nintendo is definitely the best example of this. The weakest hardware, but strong first-party IPs. And it doesn't seem like Madbox is going to have that. I mean, they don't seem like a big, very well-connected company. They're not like a Microsoft, which already had connections with the tech industry as a whole. So I don't know. I'm very skeptical about this, but I'm not even gonna like draw a general opinion. I'm not gonna like predict right now this console will fail or this console will succeed. I think we need more details, because when I first heard about the Atari VCS, I was like, I don't know, this could be something, but it could not be something. And then as you learn more, it's like, oh yeah, no, this console's gonna be a complete total failure. But you never know. Slightly Mad Studios 10 years from now could be dominating the entire console market in 2029. You never know. Who thought 20 years ago that Microsoft would be number 2? Who the hell thought 30 years ago, or even 25 years ago, whatever, that Sony would be as big as they are in console gaming? You know, before it was just Nintendo, Sega. Or who even fathomed the idea of Sega going out, withdrawing from making consoles? So that, you know, there's the 3-word saying, never say never. And it's, you know, I'm never gonna say never. I'm never gonna say, oh, this company has no chance, they're not gonna get this done. they're not going to release a successful console. There's no way that they're ever going to be successful. I'm not going to say that. I really need more information at this point. They're really just talking about specs and not so much about the games. So until I learn more about their games and what their business strategy is really going to be, and what a better idea of what the pricing is going to be and all that. And of course, we also really need to know, more than anything else, what the next generation Xbox and PlayStation 5 are going to be. Before we really predict about this console, this hypothetical console coming out 2 years after the PlayStation 5 is going to be like, right? So I don't know. It's very interesting. Definitely very intriguing. And anyone who is a fan of the gaming industry as a whole should definitely keep your eye on this. I'm very much on the fence right now on whether or not this is going to actually do anything, if it's just going to be another total, complete failure. But I could be proven. Like I said, I haven't really drawn a conclusion yet, but I'm leaning more towards the side of this probably not going to get too far. But again, I need more information before I actually make a real prediction, because that's just me speculating a little bit based off of 3 tweets and some, other information that we really need more of that before we really make a solid conclusion about this console. So I think that just about wraps it up here. Again, 21 minutes is probably too long to talk about something that we know very little of, but it's just very interesting to see a new player in the console race. It's always very interesting because you've had the same 3 companies kind of running things for the past 2 decades, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and no one else really jumping in there. But we may have a new player soon, and that's always very fun and very exciting, very interesting. So we'll see how it goes. Not gonna make any judgments or anything like that. We just need some more information, and we'll see.